Hey everyone, and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to talk about restorative justice. Now, for many of us, restorative justice is a topic that most of us haven't studied before. We may have studied the criminal justice system here in the United States, but again, restorative justice is kind of its own thing altogether, and it's a little bit different than our typical justice system. So hopefully, through watching this video and through our lessons and activities in class, you're going to get a better understanding of what restorative justice is and how to start implementing it into your own everyday life, because yes, it can be used in almost every situation, not just criminal situations. Alright, so first and foremost, I want to actually start with this really great informative video about restorative justice.
More than half of victims of violent crime don't even call the police in the first place. They prefer nothing to everything we have to offer. The vast majority of crime survivors' pain goes unhealed. What the existence of restorative justice means is that we can no longer pretend we don't know what else to do. As a country, we're really good at punishment. It's passive, it doesn't require people to act, to think, it certainly doesn't require them to change. When we lock people up, we excuse them from their responsibility to answer for what they've done. Restorative justice is a process to hold them accountable. It's a tool. People take turns answering questions like, what happened? What needs arise? Whose responsibility is it to meet those needs? And how is that person going to do it? It requires someone to take responsibility, to repair things as much as possible, and to never commit that harm again. This isn't about feeling sorry, it's about doing sorry. Things like go to school, get a job, pay restitution, apologize, do community service. Restorative justice practices have been used to address low-level infractions like vandalism, up to addressing the impact of murders on the surviving family members. Restorative justice processes are first and foremost about meeting the needs of people who are hurt. Sometimes the person who can make the greatest contribution to a survivor's healing is the person who harmed them. To come through trauma, we need answers to our questions. To say, my life was never the same after you hurt me like that. Crime survivors want the most safety possibly available. So if incarceration actually produced safety, we would have the safest country in human history. That's not what we have. The core drivers of violence are shame, isolation, an inability to meet one's economic needs, and exposure to violence. And we bake those into prisons to try and keep people from committing further violence. Incarceration exposes people to exactly the things that increase the likelihood that they'll go on to harm others. People who are hurt deserve a process that will help them heal. People who are responsible for crime have an obligation to be accountable for that. All of us deserve responses to crime that actually make us safer. Our current criminal justice system doesn't deliver any of those, and restorative justice at its best delivers them all.
All right. So when it comes to restorative justice, there are really kind of like three main parts of restorative justice that I want you all to be aware of. And these would be who has been harmed, what are their needs, and also whose obligations are these. And I did just throw a little citation down here because we're being a scholarly girl today. So these are the three big questions that you should always ask yourself any single time that you see a case in the news, or any time that even something happens to you or you experience something. These are kind of the big questions of restorative justice. So let's do a quick case study, and this is going to be kind of like a silly imaginative case study. So let's imagine that we've got person over here. We've also got this other person. They've got a smiley face. That's how you can tell that they're different people. And let's say that the smiley face person has an apple, and the person on the left steals the apple from the smiley face person, and they're like, oh, no! And then they become sad because they don't have their apple anymore. So who has been harmed? I think our traditional notion of the justice system would think, well, probably this person over here who has a face has been harmed because, you know, they lost their apple after all. Apples are very important. What are their needs? Well, they probably need their apple back. That's probably like the most simple thing that needs to happen. And then they'd be happy again. And whose obligations are these? Well, we would probably say the person who stole the apple probably has to be the one who gives the apple back. That seems like the most reasonable thing to do, right? So, person on the left has to give back the apple. Person on the right becomes happy again. Problem solved. Right? Problem solved. Have we really fixed all the issues here? I think that there's something wrong with this picture. And those of you who are very keen out there maybe also notice that the person on the left still doesn't have an apple, and still only the person on the right has an apple. And sure, it's not our job necessarily to care about the person on the left, but if we're trying to be a good community, we do want to be thinking about, does everyone have apples in this community? Does everyone have access to apples? That's a pretty important thing, because remember, everyone likes an apple. So this person right here, we forget their entire side of the story oftentimes in our justice system. Like, how are they hurting? What are their needs? And also, whose obligation is it for this person to get some apples? And how about all these people who witnessed the crime? Like, if I witness a crime in my classroom, I'm going to be kind of shaken about that. I'm going to be like, whoa, I can't trust any of you anymore. So how are all of the people in the community hurting? What are their needs? And of course, whose obligation is it to meet those needs? I have an example for you now. So police say a homeless man jailed for stealing sandwich out of someone's hand, and this is in Georgia, Marietta. Marietta is a town in Georgia. So a 55-year-old homeless man is in custody at the Cobb County Jail on a felon robbery charge after police say he stole a sandwich out of another man's hand at a Quick Trip in Marietta. Blank was arrested by Marietta police at the Quick Trip on the corner of Marietta Parkway and Fairground Street about 9:30 p.m. Sunday, according to his jail record. Blank faces a single charge of felony robbery and is subject to a $1,000 bond order, but is entering his 5th day behind bars for the alleged snack theft, records show. So again, in Georgia, it's a felony to rob someone like this, according to Georgia law. So said accused did forcefully snatch out of the hands of the victim one bag containing a sandwich, arrest warrant states. The victim stated that said accused did take the sandwich out of his hands. Said accused did admit to police to taking the sandwich from the victim, and said accused did have in his possession the property belonging to the victim. So this is a lot of like cop language right here directly from the police report. But basically what they say right here is that the person who's being accused of stealing the sandwich agreed, he admitted to it and said, yep, I stole the sandwich. So under Georgia law, robbery is a felony punishable by at least 1 year in prison and up to 20 years unless the victim is 65 or older, in which case the minimum penalty is 5 years in prison. So again, it is a felony in Georgia to steal something, and you can be punishable of at least 1 year in prison and up to 20 years. So if you get caught stealing something and you get charged in Georgia, then you will go to prison for at least a year if you actually get charged. Is this whole system fair? Would we say that this whole situation is fair? I don't know. I think a lot of us are maybe thinking, well, he got what he deserved for the crime that he committed. You steal a sandwich, you go to jail. That's what happens. That's just the law. But is the law necessarily always fair? And remember, we talked about subjective versus objective, meaning our whole concept of fair and not fair is subjective. So I want to complicate your perspective a little bit now. Regardless of if you thought that situation was fair or not fair, I want to complicate it for you. So I've got another video I want to show you really quick.
A celebration of freedom decades in the making.
We've just been praying and just trusting God that this day would come, and it's here, and we're so grateful to God.
In 1983, Alvin Kennard was charged with taking $50 during a Bessemer robbery. Thanks to prior burglary and larceny convictions, he was sentenced to life without parole under Alabama's old three strikes rule. Then today, Judge David Carpenter gave Kennard credit for time served. His niece, Patricia Jones, elated the life sentence was satisfied.
He had to be sentenced, but with it being so severe, we was just hoping that one day God would free him, and he did.
Judge Carpenter said that if Kennard had been given life in prison under the state's current sentencing guidelines, he would have been eligible for parole back in 1999. Instead, he had to wait 20 extra years to receive his freedom. During today's resentencing, Kennard apologized and took responsibility for his crime. He told the judge he wants to become a carpenter.
He said he want to get him a job. He want to support himself, and we're going to support him. And in every way we can.
Jones and the judge were not sure exactly when her uncle will be released from Bessemer's Donaldson prison. In Bessemer, John Papke, WVTM 13.
All right, so that story that we just saw right there, complicating our perspective a little bit, right? Because here we have a man who spent 36 years in prison for stealing $50 from a bakery and is now set to be freed. Again, 36 years in prison for stealing $50. So the underlying reason why Kennard, a man who now lives in the faith-based wing of the Donaldson Correctional Facility, was sentenced to life without parole for the robbery of Highlands Bakery in 1983 was because he had been previously convicted of 3 nonviolent property crimes. In 1979, back when Kennard was 18 years old, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of second-degree burglary in connection with a break-in at an unoccupied service station. His pleading documents state, for those 3 charges, all of which were tied to that one incident, he was sentenced to 3 years probation. The next time he was convicted for the bakery robbery, which was committed with a pocket knife and involved no injuries, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Again, that's life without the possibility of parole. If the same crime had been committed today and current sentencing standards were used, even with prior offenses taken into account, Kennard's pleading documents state that he would have been eligible for a minimum sentence of 10 years and a maximum sentence of 21 years in prison. So if he would have done the same exact crime today, if he were the same exact person doing the same exact crime today, he would have been sentenced for a minimum of 10 years and a maximum of 21 years. But again, he served 36 years. And on top of that, he was going to serve his entire life until lawyers stepped in. As incredible as this opportunity is for Mr. Kennard, and as happy as we are for him, we know that there are hundreds of similarly situated, incarcerated people in the state who don't have attorneys, who don't have a voice, Crowder said. As this state grapples with the Department of Justice involvement and unconstitutional prisons, I would hope our lawmakers, our courts, and our governor would do more to address these injustices. So there is a side of the story that we are obviously missing in all of these cases. In this case that we just read about, we got a little bit about Kennard's story, but in the one previous to that, we didn't get to hear anything about the robber's story. We didn't get to hear anything about his life. So this leads us, we are going to have a ton of questions about the situation. Like, can we really just say that these people got what they deserved? Or should we be questioning, like, well, what put these people in this situation to cause all this to happen? And the big question that I always want you to ask is why? For example, why did this man steal in this first place? Why did he not have the right resources so he wouldn't have to steal at all? Why wasn't he aware of the laws in place at the time he committed these crimes? Why didn't anyone stand up for him until now? Why? It's all about why with these. Because this is all information that we don't get to see in the criminal justice system or just the justice system in general in the United States. We don't get to see all sides of the story. We often only get to see things from the perspective of a victim. And then, the person who commits a crime just has to defend themselves and try not to make themselves seem like a bad person. So again, the 3 major pieces of restorative justice that I always want you to question is who has been harmed, what are their needs, and whose obligations are these. And again, you mix this in with all of your questions about why. Why did this situation happen in the first place? Let's get to the core of what really happened here. Does everyone have apples in this situation? Or are some people given apples and some people aren't given apples? And is that going to be what leads to crime? Are some people going hungry and some people have plenty of food? And is that the thing that is going to lead to crime? You always have to think a little bit bigger, and that is what restorative justice has us do. If you still have questions about restorative justice, make sure that you drop a comment below, or that you can also email me with a question as well. We're going to be doing a ton of work with restorative justice, so for sure we're going to keep digging deep into some of these cases and figuring out some of the bigger questions like these that you see on the screen, and also some bigger questions of why. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.